Hello and welcome to part 3 of setting up your Egro Next Touch coffee. In this part we're going to calibrate the grinder to be set at the correct grind setting for our Egro. What you're seeing right now is a top-down view of the Egro Next Touch coffee. There's a reason, of course, why we didn't hang the cool coffee module after we connected it, and that is because we're actually going to take off this top plate. To give you some quick familiarity with the top plate, it has on here these little gears. Those are our 4 motors that power our hopper augers. And in these auger mounts here have a sensor inside of them. You'll see the little infrared guides there. Those sensors are there to make sure that coffee's in the hopper. If coffee's not in the hopper, the little laser will make a connection, and then of course it'll pop up on the screen to refill whatever hopper needs refilling. Of course, to identify your hoppers, you can identify them in programming, but also you have an analog here, A, B, C, and D, so A, B, C, and D. From that, one other thing that you can do with the hoppers off when you have nothing on here is you could actually take off this plate. So if you pull this tab, pull it towards you, you can actually get into the funnel that is then leading you into the grinder. So sometimes if you get a lot of coffee stuck in here or anything like that, you can take this guy off and get that coffee out of there. Of course, this little hole here, this guy right there, that is where your cleaning tablet goes, so the funnel that's in the hopper, that directly goes into here. Other things to note, you do have a couple cutouts here and up here. Within these cutouts is basically where the hopper lock latches are, so those latches that lock in when you put the hopper in so you can't take the hopper off, that's where those exist. So if you need to sometimes remove the hopper, there is a manual release available inside, but the easiest way to do it, of course, is via programming. Now, to calibrate the grinder, what we're going to do is, of course, we already have this guy off. We're going to undo the 2 screws here and take off this side panel. As you can see, TV magic again. I already have my screws out. We're going to do the same thing on the back here. And there we go. Now, on Egros, to take off the side panels, you only need to loosen them. But to take off the top plate, you need to take them out all the way. So we are going to remove all 6 screws completely. Then you'll be able to just reach off to the side and give it a quick pull up, and you'll be able to open up the front door a little bit to give you a little bit of leverage underneath if you need to. But then, of course, this whole plate will come up. Now you can notice here that there are electrical connections to a small circuit board. This board controls our auger motors. Now, we're not actually going to disconnect anything on here because we don't need to. What we're going to do is we're just going to tilt and tip this guy out of the way. Now, the easiest thing to do actually when I'm working in here a lot of times is just to do this because there's enough room to leave it like this. I'm going to tip it out of the way a little bit more just because I want you guys to have the ability to see what I'm doing, of course, because otherwise that camera angle isn't good. So we're just going to move that out of the way just like that, and I'll hold it in place. Here's our grinder. There's our grinder capacitor, and here's our SAG motor. Now this motor allows us to electronically actually move the grinder adjustment. When the algorithms are complete for the 4-hopper, they'll actually adjust the sag setting per coffee. That feature's coming shortly, but it is not yet available on the pre-production machines. Now, what you'll notice here is right there is a red marking, and in the front right here by the spout is a red marking. Now, red to red is basically factory 0. So that is as close as the burrs can get to each other without grinding and filing each other down. Now, what we want to do is we want to make sure that we are, for the intents and purposes of the all-town bare net parameters, for instance, 11 teeth from this marking to this marking. Now, we will be able, to manually count that, which is why we took off the top. And really the reason why we took off the top is to actually see this top marking here. If we were able to see it from the front, then we would have needed to take this off. Now, what we're going to do now is we're actually going to go into the tech menu on the machine UI, go into products, and then SAG self-adjusting grinder. In there, you actually have an open and close option on the bottom. So if I press close, you can see that grinder slowly whirring itself as it steps down and closes. And of course, the other way, we hit open, and it'll open back up. Now you can do this also in the diagnostics settings of the tech menu, but of course the Egro tech menu, not the UI tech menu. But you can do it much faster just going through the self-adjusting grinder setting in the tech side of the Egro UI under products. For the parameter that we're working with Baronet here, we're just going to make sure that we have 11 teeth. Once this is counted and ready to go, we're done with this part. We don't have to do anything else. And at that point, once it's 11 teeth away, we can hit save and log out there, and then put our top back onto our machine, making sure that, of course, we line everything up. At this point, we know that the grind setting is at the correct particle size, and the next thing that we're going to do is actually assign coffees to the grinders and then calibrate said grinder. Alrighty, so now that we have calibrated our hopper to make sure that it is at the right grind setting, what we're going to do is we're going to put on our hoppers and we're basically going to calibrate our coffee. Now, when we put our hoppers on, they're going to latch into place. The only way to get them off again is to go into the main menu, either the cleaning settings or the technical settings. Under the cleaning menu, you'll actually have a unlock hopper. When you select that, you'll hear that click. That releases the latch. You can actually take the hoppers back off that. Otherwise, they will be locked into place. Now, to calibrate our grinder hopper dose, basically, properly, is we do require you to have a scale, so you will need to grab a gram scale. The more accurate, the better. And what we are going to do is, via programming, we're going to go into our products section, and then hoppers and blends. Now, you can see here we have our hoppers, hopper A, B, C, and D, and it's also labeled A, B, C, and D, just like they were labeled on top of the machine. Now, each parameter, for instance, this Baronet Alltown parameter that you're seeing in front of you, will actually have all the different coffees that they're using. They're going to be under the coffee section. What we're going to do is we're actually going to take these coffees and assign them to a hopper. Now, the way that we're going to do that is, for instance, we're going to select hopper A. In this parameter, carried over from the other machine, it says that it wants to be a Colombian, but I actually put a decaf in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select a little pencil. I'm going to select assign coffee here. A little drop down is going to open up, and I'm going to find my decaf. So house decaf blend. Now, underneath here, it's going to ask for your grams measured calibration. The way to do this calibration, of course, is we are going to hit start and we're going to hit calibrate. But we need to capture that coffee. And the way that we capture that coffee is we take out our scale, we zero it out, whichever vessel we're going to capture our coffee in. Usually just a paper cup works best. There we go. We're actually going to open our door and our ground spin so that we can swing out our brew group, place our cup underneath the spout, and hit start. At this point, the auger is going to dose and the grinder is going to grind. Eventually it's going to run through and finish grinding. Now, when you're starting off fresh, which means there was never any coffee in the hopper, run the start calibration 3 times and don't weigh anything. Just run it 3 times and let it fill up the full auger. Just like on the powder module, making sure that we can run and grind everything through is key, and to make sure that that system is as accurate as possible. Once we just do 3 very quick without weighing, we're going to zero our cup, make sure that it has nothing in it, and now we're actually going to do a calibration. We're going to weigh it. There we are. So after 3 unweighed calibrations, we do our 4th and we weigh it, and we have 12.4. Now that's 12.4, and I personally like doing an average of 3, just because coffee beans aren't all the same size, especially when we're dealing with blends. So I'm going to grind 2 more times, weighing each time. And now we got 12.8. And now we have 12.4 again. So with that, we are going to take an average of all 3 of those. So very fast math tells me that that is going to come out to 12.53. So we're going to tell that to be just 12.5. At this point, for this coffee, we can close everything up. But if you're doing more than 1 coffee, of course, leave it open. But just so that you have it in shot, let me make sure. There we go. So now in grams measured, I'm going to select that 10 that's in there. I'm going to put in 12.5, hit the check mark to save it, and then hit save to save it again. And now our decaf is calibrated. At this point, I'm going to do the same thing for hopper B, C, and D. So we're going to grind 3 times using the start calibration button and not weigh anything. We're just going to make sure that the auger is fully charged with coffee. And then we're going to take an average of 3 calibrations. And that is the number that we're going to input inside of the system. Now, if you are working with a chain account where we have somebody like, let's say, a roaster like Baronat, we do have a default setting for all 8 coffees. So that will be emailed to you. But it is always beneficial to just confirm that the calibration is correct. Now, if you ever have to adjust the grind setting via the self-adjusting grinder here under products, of course have our open and close. Because it's a non-loaded grinder, you can open and close it as much as you need to. But if you ever need to open or close the grinder and you do it quite drastically, about 5 to 6 points in a direction, it's usually worth confirming that your grind calibration doses are still correct. The same is true on an Allegro 1 and on an Allegro Next Espresso. Anytime you drastically adjust the grind setting, you want to make sure that your grinder is properly calibrated so that you're actually dosing the proper amount.